Hey everybody, Michael Soothing here. I thought today maybe we would talk a little bit about cards, namely poker. Because yesterday I went and played a little Hold'em poker tournament at a casino close by where I'm living out in the Sacramento Valley right now. Should I set up this deck so that I get 2 aces every time? 2 aces is the best starting hand in Hold'em poker. Anyway, kind of got me in the mood to start talking about maybe a series on basic poker lessons. I did all right in the tournament. There were 71 entrants in the tourney. It was a daily tournament. They do it every morning at the casino I was visiting. Oops, sorry about that. They do it every morning, and so it's small. It's a small buy-in tournament, $30 buy-in, no limit Hold'em, which is the game that is known as the Cadillac of poker, no limit. And I did pretty well. I came in 7th, which was in the money. So that paid $125. So I had a good profit. And then I played in a side game called Omaha, where you have 4 cards in your hand. 4 cards in your hand. Whoops, I'm cheating. I have 5. Let's get rid of 1. If you look at my hand, you're going to say, he wants to get rid of the 3. But in Omaha, 3 might be a good card to keep. And I'll explain why to you some other day when we do a lesson on Omaha. A 3 might be good if you have an ace to go with it. So I like the ace-king suited, of course. Ace-king suited is very powerful. But today we're going to talk about Hold'em. So as I was saying, and then I played in Omaha and made a good profit there. And that's a game where you have 4 cards in your hand instead of 2. And the board comes up just like Hold'em, 5 cards up. First 3, which is called the flop, and then a 4th card, which is called the turn, and then a 5th card called the river, betting round in between each one. In Omaha, you're looking to make the best high hand or the best low hand, but there's a couple of qualifications. One is you have to use 2 cards from your hand and 3 cards from the board, okay? The up cards on the board. You can use any 2 from your hand and any 3 from the board, but you can't use any other variation. You can't use 1 from your hand and 4 from the board or anything like that, right? So we'll show you Omaha in some future video, okay? But for now, I just wanted to talk a little bit about basics. In case you're not familiar with Hold'em strategy concepts, here's a paper that you can get in most card rooms for free. Card Room Magazine, Northern California's poker and casino news, right? And in this particular edition, they have a nice chart that's good for both beginners and intermediate players to remind themselves of starting hands in Hold'em. What should you start with as a playable hand? Well, that all depends on position. Your position has to do with whether you're the first one to act behind the button, or the second, or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, or the sixth, or the seventh, or the eighth, or the ninth. Okay? So, if nobody's come in for a raise, and you're the first person who has to decide whether to check or bet, what should you do? What hands are playable? Well, believe it or not, almost no hands are playable in that position. And only the very best hands. For example, safe Holden starting hand guidelines when no one else has entered the pot. As you can see, what he advocates is only coming in with pocket aces, pocket kings, or pocket queens as far as pairs if you're in first position. Or if you don't have a pair, you could come in with ace king or ace queen suited. Or you could come in with ace king not suited. Now that's not very many starting combinations, is it? This is not a hard and fast rule, of course. It's just a guideline. If you're in a very soft game, bad players, easy players, then maybe your hand rank values would vary, of course. It's going to vary depending on the circumstances. But it's a nice guideline. Well, I'm trying to illustrate to you the value of position, whether you're the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, or 10th person to act in a hand. Being last to act is a huge, huge advantage. And the reason why is because you already have a good idea what your opponents are going to do by then. So if you're last to act and there's a giant bet and a giant raise and a giant re-raise all happening before it gets to you, and you have pocket sevens in your hand or ace 10, you know your hand is no good and you can throw it away. But if everybody was to check to you and you had pocket sevens or ace 10, you could raise with it because you're pretty sure nobody in front of you has a strong hand, okay? So that's what this chart is about. And as you can see here, he says you're only going to play about 3% of your starting, of the two cards you get, you're only going to come in about 3% of the time. So you're going to say to me, that sounds pretty boring if I can only play 3% of the time. But wait, remember, the button is moving one place each hand. So you're going to be in middle position and late position. Well, if you're in late position, then you might be able to play all of these hands in late position, okay? And then you could play as much as 40% of the time and still be coming in with safe starting card. So this shows you how much more is playable when you're last to act. So that's what the whole chart is based on. We'll talk more about that in a future poker lesson. By the way, this guy, Mike Carroll, they used to call him Crazy Mike, okay? Sometimes I've been called Crazy Mike, but most people call me Mike. Only a handful of very special people call me Michael. And you're not allowed to call me that unless you're very, very close to me. All right, so anyway, Crazy Mike Carroll. he looks a little crazy, doesn't he? His claim to fame, by the way, he was one of the early players in LA, Los Angeles, California card rooms, back when the game was 5-card draw, way back in prehistoric Cambrian era times. And he was known for lots of theatrical antics, jumping up and down at the table. This was before there were cameras, causing people to act dramatic. Do you ever think the reality shows on TV are all a big put on? I do. Anyway, like I was watching Poker After Dark last night, and one guy was acting completely crazy the whole time. I'm sure it was just hemming it up for the camera. Anyway, Crazy Mike Caro, his claim to fame was he wrote Caro's Book of Tells. And tells are very important. Have you ever watched the movie Rounders? If you want to, with Matt Damon, and who was his co-star? Great actor. Can't remember his name. Anyway, you'll tell me, somebody out there. In Rounders, by the way, was the best poker movie ever made, because they talk about strategy. They show the game realistically, nothing like that old Steve McQueen film where they didn't have a good consultant and everything done about poker was wrong when they showed that film, Anyway, in Rounders, getting a tell on your opponent is when there's something about their body language or expressions or mannerisms or attitude that gives them away as to what they're doing, whether they have a great hand, a good hand, a medium hand, or they're bluffing, right? Mike Caro wrote the Book of Tells, common tells you see, especially amongst amateurs, like, for example, weak means strong. So if they're acting all timid when they make their raise, all timid when they come out with their bet, and they're kind of going, la la la, I hope you don't call me, with their body language, right? That means they have a powerhouse hand. So don't give tells like that to your opponent. Don't pretend you're weak when you're really strong, because any decent poker player will immediately be on to you, okay? And conversely, when someone is bluffing and they're an amateur, frequently strong means weak, right? So if they're bluffing you, they think you don't have a great hand. They want to overbet you and raise you, and so they come out all big and bold, big raise, all totally confident and like no one can possibly beat my hand, right? Amongst amateurs, that means they're bluffing, okay? So they stare you down and look you in the eye like, I dare you to call me, right? So that's one tell. There is, of course, an opposite tell that some amateurs do. When they're bluffing, they don't want you to call, of course, and they get stone still. They don't want to do anything to cause you to think or react that would invite you to call them. So that's a different kind of tell. If somebody just freezes and refuses to blink or move, that's often also a tell of a bluff, okay? All right, so in the movie Rounders, Matt Damon is going up against Teddy KGB, the famous mob-connected Russian. And he's been watching Teddy, right? And they're in a $10,000 heads-up match. They each put up 10 grand. And Matt Damon's trying to win so he can win his entry into the World Series of Poker. And he loses all his money, of course, in the beginning of the film to Teddy KGB. Later, he comes back for a rematch. Now he's way in the hole. He's got to dig out of a hole. Borrows the money from his professor, right? Comes back and he's watching Teddy. And Teddy has a habit of taking an Oreo cookie like this. Except this is a thin one. Teddy's cookies were the regular Oreos. See, this is the thin kind. If you're pre-diabetic, then you eat this kind, less sugar, okay? And so Teddy would always have his cookies handy, and he would twist them like this. Twist, twist, until he could get it to come apart. And when it came apart, if he ate half of it, and looked satisfied, it meant he had a really good hand. Matt Damon figured this out. And so, when Teddy made a bet and had a monster hand, Matt Damon had a really good hand, but he knew it was beat by Teddy's hand, so he threw his hand away. And Teddy KGB got furious. How could you throw away a monster hand, right? Why didn't you pay me off? And then he realized it was the cookies. And he took his tray of Oreos and threw them against the wall when he realized he had given him a tell. See, I normally can't eat these. But since we're talking about this story today, I have a license to eat one. I'm always looking for a good excuse to cheat on my diet, right? So, Oreo Thins. I like the chocolate part the best anyway. I'm not one of those people that used to open them and scrape out the frosting and eat it like some folks. But if any of you are one of those, we can buy a package of Oreos and I'll scrape all the frosting off for you and put it on a plate, and you can eat that, and then I'll eat the chocolate wafers, okay? How does that sound? Anyway, back to our concept du jour. What I'm gonna do is I think I'll do a series of poker lessons for beginners. And I am, by the way, I'm not bragging. I'm not a great player. I'm not a world-class player. None of that. But I am a profitable player. I've had my share of wins in tournaments. Back when I was younger in particular, before I had such a demanding rocket science job, I used to play all the time. And yeah, I would win tournaments online when it was still legal and in casinos. So I won my entry into the World Series of Poker one time, and in a satellite tournament. It was about a $7,000 payoff plus another $5,000 for the trip to Vegas and all of that. I won 2 entries into the Party Poker Million Mexico cruise, $10,000 buy-in event. I was able to sell one of those wins to Johnny Chan, if you know who that is, at a discount though, $8,000. But hey, that put me $8,000 ahead before I even began the tournament. Plus, you got the cruise for 2 and all that. All right, so I'm not telling you this to blow my horn. I'm just telling you I'm not a complete idiot when it comes to poker, so if I'm going to do a series of poker lessons, I know something about what I'm talking about, even though I may not be a real sharp, world-class expert, okay? So, look, this guy won a bracelet. You get a gold bracelet if you win an event in the World Series of Poker. It's really cool to have the bracelet anyway. He won the $3,000 buy-in horse event. If you wonder what a horse stands for, it's not a basketball game. It's not poker played in a basketball court, okay? It's Hold'em, Omaha, Raz. Raz is 7-card stud, lowest hand wins, right? And 7-card stud, okay? And then what does the E stand for? 8 or better, 7-card stud, high-low 8 or better is the last one. Why that has an E for it, I'm not sure. But anyway, they vary the game. So they'll play a round of Hold'em, then a round of Omaha. So you have to be then a round of stud, etc. So you have to be a great all-around player at several games to win that event. They have this online, by the way, on PokerStars. You can try it sometime. So, I like the look of all these different chips. Don't you? All these different kinds of chips. You know, some people actually collect casino poker chips, which I think is kind of interesting. They have chips from a long time ago, the early days of Vegas, stuff like that. All right, so back to our starting hands. They distracted me with food dishes here. Casinos usually have good food. That's how they draw you in, right? He's got a whole article along with this chart describing how to play various starting hands. And in a future lesson, we'll talk about why the article makes sense if you're a beginning to medium player. Everyone needs to remind themselves of this now and then. Even very good players start to weaken, start to play starting hands they shouldn't play, like pocket tens, in first position, for example. It looks nice, but for example, if you're in a game where you've got tight, aggressive players, they're very good players, right? And you come in the very first position with 2 nines or 2 jacks or 8-9 suited, right? That could get you into a lot of trouble later. Let's say, for example, you're in first position and you're dealt 2 jacks, okay? In late position, if there's no giant raises ahead of you, that looks like a great hand, right? Great hand. By the way, there's a stupid home game called Deuces, Jacks, Man with the Axe, where deuces and jacks are wild. Anyway, I'm off track. Okay, so that is a good hand in late position if the action is fairly mellow ahead of you. But if you're in first position and you play these 2 cards, what do you do if there's a giant raise and a giant re-raise, behind you after you come in? You may very well be beat by pocket queens, pocket kings, or pocket aces. And even if you're not, somebody out there may have, likely has, if there's two big raises, ace king or ace queen, right? So if they have ace king, for example, ace king, maybe they got ace king suited. They can make a flush. They can hit a pair of kings. They can hit a pair of aces. And same with ace queen, right? Now if the board comes up with a couple big cards like that, what are you gonna do with your pocket jacks? You don't know where you are in the hand. If there's a big bet and raise, do you throw your jacks away? Or are your opponents bluffing, or what? It makes it difficult for you to decide what to do. It's so hard to tell if you're ahead or behind in the hand. Whereas in late position, you already know. In late position, if the players that came in ahead of you are weak, no big raises, your pocket jacks are probably the best hand. And you can raise with them. But in first position, who knows, right? So typically you would come in with a raise. But what do you do when there's a giant re-raise? 4 times the size of your raise. Now what, right? So, and what do you do if you call and the flop comes with an ace, a king, or a queen on it? You're likely beat if your opponent bets into you, but he might be bluffing. Maybe he's got pocket tens. Now he can use the board to bluff into you. Whereas if you had a bigger pair, well, he wouldn't be able to do that. So, on another future video, we'll come down here onto our makeshift poker arena here, and we will talk about strategy. We'll deal out some pretend hands, and talk about what we would do with them. I don't have enough room here to do this right. I'll back the camera up when we do this for real, and we'll give all of our players some chips and talk about what they should do. Another thing I'll do is sometime I'll play an online one-table tournament, and we'll talk about what we're doing all the way through it. Talk about the strategies. So in Hold'em poker, each player gets, this is, by the way, the worst 2 cards you can get in Hold'em. 7 deuce offsuit. That would probably be my hand, right? That guy has to throw away no matter what. Jack 5, that's weak, right? What else we got here? See, they're all pretty bad hands. And I don't have this set up right now to show you, but we'll do it in a future video. We'll show you what we can do. There's the only good hand here, pocket 8s. Is it playable? Well, if you're in late position, it's playable. These guys all have crap. So if this guy comes in for a raise, okay, there's going to be blinds here. Let's say there's 2 and 4. That's how the game starts, right? There's a 2-chip blind and a 4-chip blind. That gives you something to shoot for. Those are forced bets that the first and second player has to come in. And then the next time it's small and big blind, and the next hand it's small and big blind, and then small and big blind. It just keeps going around the table, the forced bets, right? So in this scenario, this hand is terrible, it's gonna fold. This hand is terrible, he's gonna fold. This hand is terrible, he's gonna fold. This guy has pocket 8s. He's probably gonna come in for a raise. I raise it to 8. I raise it to 10, whatever, right? my hand, worst hand in poker, I'm gonna fold. Okay? This guy, he's not gonna want to call a big raise with Jack 5 offsuit. He's gonna fold. So he loses his chips to the better, the raiser. And this guy here, he's got a terrible hand. 3-6, that's no good. So he's gonna throw his chips away. The pocket eight's won without even seeing a flop, see? That's the value of being later in position, having some information. If you were in an early position, you couldn't even play this hand, really, not in first or second or third position. So that ended that hand. That was a boring hand, but most of them are more exciting than that. All right, so we'll do some practice hands in a future video, and then you can get the idea of some of the strategy concepts, odds, implied odds, things like that. What's important, right? So let's come back and talk about what we might discuss in some future videos on poker. I'll bring out one of my strategy books by one of the famous authors, and we'll talk about some of the basic strategies that you can learn. You know what's really fun in poker? If you can go into a soft game, like I was in a soft Omaha game yesterday. Soft meaning there was a lot of loose money and a lot of bad players. And I was able to stack up giant mountains of chips, and that's a rare occurrence, but it's really fun when you can do it. People were playing all kinds of bad hands, and when that happens, if you're a good player, you tighten up and play only really good hands. So when you do win, you win big pots off of all that loose money. And you don't come in and start playing bad hands with players doing that. It's just the opposite, right? So, wouldn't you like to have like 30 stacks that are of chips that are about that size after you play for a while? 30 stacks of those. That's very fun when it can happen. Sometimes you're going to run bad, even if you're a real good player, and you're going to take a beating and lose. But if you play better than your opponents in the long run, you're going to have a win rate. I track my play in a notebook, so I'm not fooling myself saying, oh, you know, I almost always win or whatever. I won $400 last week and I didn't lose anything. No, that's not how you do it. You log every session, every poker session into a book, and you say, okay, I played 6 hours, I won $360. That was about what I won yesterday. But the session before that, well, I won the session before that also. But there was an earlier session where I lost in Omaha. So that goes in the book too. 3 hours, $160 loss, right? So you take all your losses, you take all your wins cumulatively minus your losses. Look at the hours you played over a period of time, and then you could calculate your win rate. And, you know, if you tip the dealer using chips, okay, then you don't have to deduct that out, because when you cash in, you already know what your profit is after tipping and everything. Yeah. So I try to tip the dealer whenever I win a decent pot, but I'm not one of those guys who throws 10 chips at the dealer every time they get a good pot. That's a good way to be a long-term loser, okay? It might make you feel good about your ego, but it's not going to make you feel good about your win rate to do that. So be good to the dealer, but don't get carried away. All right, so I think that'll do it for now. This is about 35 minutes already, and I think that's enough because my voice is going to get hoarse otherwise, and I'll only be able to whisper. So if you like whisper video, it will be okay. All right, everybody. You take care now, and we'll come back and do this again in the future. Until then, don't ASMR and drive. All right. Bye-bye.